Welcome to a journey that uncovers the deepest secrets of human existence, a journey into the very heart of our ancestral and spiritual being. In the mystery of blood, vertical bar heritage, race and spirit, the enlightened mind of Annie Besant guides us toward a transcendental understanding of the invisible connections between blood, our race, and the spirit that resides within each of us. This is not merely a study of physical genealogies, but a profound exploration of how spiritual forces and cosmic laws are passed down through generations, shaping our souls and determining the course of our evolution. Blood, that vital fluid running through our veins, is not just a carrier of physical life, but also a sacred link to the past, a channel through which the spiritual energies of our ancestors are transmitted. Annie Besant, with her deep esoteric knowledge and transcendental vision, reveals how racial heritage and spiritual power are intrinsically connected. Through her words, we will understand that each human being is the bearer of a legacy much greater than their earthly lineage, a cosmic inheritance that spans the vast dimensions of spirit and the universe. Throughout this audiobook, we will not only decipher the enigma of our own identity, but also uncover the true nature of who we are, where we come from, and where we are headed. Prepare for a revelation that will transform your perception of blood, race, and spirit, connecting you to the deep roots of humanity and the cosmos. This is a call for those seeking to understand the deepest mysteries of life, a call to awaken to a new level of consciousness. The inheritance that unites us goes beyond the physical. It is an inheritance born in the spirit, eternal, without limits or boundaries. The mystery of blood awaits you, and it's time to discover it. I have traveled many paths in search of ancient wisdom. I have witnessed the roar of political struggle and the sweet murmur of initiatory chambers. I have fervently defended human causes and contemplated eternal truths from the threshold of hidden temples. Yet among all the mysteries that have touched my soul, none has been more veiled or more sacred than the mystery of blood. For blood is much more than a bodily fluid. It is the silent bearer of forgotten memories, the invisible vehicle of ancestral vibrations, and the dense manifestation of spiritual principles that precede birth and transcend death. Blood is the red thread that connects the flesh to the soul, and the soul to its cosmic lineage. Its pulse is not merely biological, it is magical, ritual, and stellar. Many in my time dared to speak of heritage, of races, of the evolution of man, but they did so from the wax of materialism. They reduced the miracle of incarnation to a mere combination of genes and chromosomes, failing to perceive that every cell is woven by the will of others, and that every drop of blood responds to patterns traced on invisible planes. Darwinism, useful in the study of form, became a prison when it was applied to the soul. Therefore I write these pages that time did not allow me to write, but which the soul of the world has kept for those who know how to listen. To speak of blood is to speak of the destiny of souls that travel in racial waves. It is to speak of the secrets of karma and of the alchemy that transforms the animal into the adept. It is also to speak of the profane abuse certain societies have committed by manipulating this sacred knowledge, using blood for purposes of control, sacrifice, or exclusion. And it is to denounce the spiritual heresy that is racism, born from the forgetfulness that every racial form is temporary, but the spirit is eternal. In these pages you will find no medical treatise nor historical genealogy. You will find, if you are willing, an esoteric vision of blood as a bridge between worlds. We will speak of the ethers that surround it, of invisible lineages, of the pacts sealed with it, and of the spiritual future of man, whose blood must one day vibrate with the note of the inner Christ. It is no coincidence that ancient cultures offered blood to the gods. It is no coincidence that the grail contained blood, nor that the incarnate Logos shed it to redeem humanity. For in the ritual, symbolic or sacrificial shedding lies a key to understanding the descent of the spirit into matter and the subsequent return of man to the spheres of light. These teachings were preserved by secret schools, some now extinct and others still latent, awaiting the right moment. The world was not ready for this revelation in my time. Perhaps it is now. If so, may the reader read not only with the mind, but with their own blood, for it knows, even if you have forgotten. From the lodge where the wise watch over humanity, I offer these words as a spark to rekindle the memory of the divine lineage that dwells within you. Annie Besant, Communion with the Hidden Heart of the World, The Mystery of Blood, Heritage, Race and Spirit. By Annie Besant. We have noticed that more than 80% of visitors to our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to keep creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. The Current of Life, the Vital Principle in the Blood. There is a current that flows silently beneath all forms of manifested life. It is invisible to the coarse senses, but perceptible to the eye of the soul. That current is life itself, descending from the unmanifested heights of the heavens into the dense realms of form. Its most intimate and powerful vehicle in the human body is the blood. The science of my time strove to measure the blood, analyze its components, and study its circulation. Yet beyond the red blood cells, plasma, and the oxygen carried, lies a deeper mystery. Blood is the dwelling place of prana, the vital breath, that solar force that penetrates every living substance, and finding its home in the blood, animates the body with the divine spark. When a child is born, their blood begins to beat in harmony with the earth. But the soul that descends, drawn by karma, by emotional bonds, by the etheric lineage of the parents, imprints upon that blood its memories, tendencies, and unresolved longings. Thus, blood not only gives physical life, but also guards the map of incarnation. Those who understand this mystery begin to glimpse why in the ancient mysteries the initiate was instructed in the mastery of their blood. It was not about mastering the pulse or heartbeat, but harmonizing the vital impulses with cosmic rhythms, because blood vibrates, and its vibration can darken or illuminate consciousness. The heart, the sacred organ par excellence, does not act as a mere biological pump, but as a sanctuary where the fire of life is purified. In the esoteric teachings I received from the Masters, it was revealed to us that the heart is the entry point of the spirit into the etheric body. From there, prana is distributed through the blood. This circulation is not mechanical, it is a perpetual rite. In the ancient Atlantean temples, now lost beneath oceans and memory, priests could read the state of a human soul by observing the etheric vibration of their blood. No words were needed. The blood aura revealed the soul's story. This, which may seem like a myth to profane eyes, was common knowledge in times of greater connection to subtle worlds. Human blood is not the same in all beings. Just as there are different bodies, there are also different vibrational qualities in the blood determined by the spiritual evolution of the incarnated soul. The adept, for example, has refined their matter so much that their blood vibrates at higher tones, almost imperceptible to the average clairvoyant. That is why certain initiatory degrees require physical purifications and ritual fasts, not to please a deity, but to elevate the blood's rhythm or subtler frequencies. Each root race that has inhabited the earth had a distinctive quality in its blood. The Lemurians possessed dense blood charged with telluric energies. The Atlanteans, blood impregnated with magical power. The Aryans, blood that in its original purity began to tune to mental light. And in each sub-race, these qualities were nuanced according to the karmic and cosmic purposes of human evolution. This principle of blood differentiation should not be confused with modern ideas of racial supremacy, which constitute a profane perversion of sacred knowledge. Differences in blood do not imply superiority, but distinct stages in the evolution of the collective soul, just as the colors of the day are not superior to each other, but aspects of the same solar cycle. Blood, being animated by prana, is also the instrument through which the body responds to emotions. A shock, deep sadness, sublime inspiration, all affect the vibrational quality of the blood, which reacts like a lake touched by the wind. That is why in ancient magic it was said that the spell resides in the blood, not because the blood is magical by itself, but because its etheric field is a mirror reflecting invisible forces. In certain spiritual lineages, the wisdom to protect the blood has been preserved. This is not superstition, but an intuitive understanding that any loss of blood, especially in rituals, childbirth, death, or violence, creates an energetic opening that can attract entities from the lower astral or the inferior etheric plane. Hence, ancient rites of war, sacrifice, or menstruation were accompanied by chants. Symbols or periods of isolation were protective measures for the soul, not meaningless taboos or punishments. Thus, blood reveals itself as the river in which the soul floats during its stay in matter, where higher worlds can pour their influence if the current is clean and sacred. It is no coincidence that in the deepest Christian ceremonies, the blood of the Redeemer is invoked as a symbol of redemption and spiritual communion. Nor is it chance that the most archaic cultures offered blood on their altars. What all knew, though in different languages, is that blood is the bridge, the contract, the channel. For the student of occultism, understanding blood is beginning to understand the mystery of incarnation itself. It is seeing that the spirit, in its descent, needs living matter to receive it. And that matter, when the blood is conserved, becomes the chalice where the soul can shine. And so, from the current of life that flows in every being, the invisible map of the incarnated soul begins to take shape. Chapter 2. The Invisible Heritage, Genesis of the Spiritual Lineage. Man is not merely the heir of a biological lineage. Beyond surnames, lands, monuments, and genealogies carved in stone, there exists an older, deeper, more real line of inheritance, one that is passed from soul to soul, from vibration to vibration, like a fire that does not belong to this world yet burns at the center of every being. This invisible heritage is the golden thread that connects human beings, not by physical blood, but by vibrational affinity. The soul that incarnates does not do so by chance, nor by a simple combination of genetic factors, but by karmic attraction, by spiritual resonance with certain lines of experience and evolution. Thus, every family in the world houses not only the history of its bodies, but also the silent history of the hidden bonds between the souls that compose it. There is an esoteric law, barely outlined in the ancient treatises of Adar, which we might call the law of soul affinity. This law teaches that the soul seeks to incarnate within a vibratory matrix familiar to it through past experiences, unpaid debts, or purposes that require fulfillment. Just as planets revolve within specific orbits determined by the attraction of celestial bodies, so too do souls revolve around invisible spiritual lineages, repeating meetings, pacts, and lessons. Physical blood is the garment of the soul in each incarnation, but the spiritual lineage is not subject to DNA. There are beings whose earthly blood differs, yet they belong to the same spiritual family. They recognize each other by the look, the word, the gesture, the purpose. They seek and find each other across centuries. Their heritage is not genetic but luminous. This invisible lineage has been preserved by certain inner orders since the days of Atlantis. The mystery schools, which even in my time whispered behind veils of silence, taught that the soul does not descend whimsically, but follows a transmission line of wisdom that must continue on earth. Those who carry ancient seeds in their hearts are not always born among the great, but their works reveal them. They are the bearers of the hidden fire. I have known souls who, incarnating in humble families, have radiated a light that no formal education can explain. I have observed children with eyes too deep for their age and knew, without words, that their lineage was not recent. They come from afar, from other races, from other ages of the world, and their heritage is the promise they carry. They are the children of luminous karma, strategically planted to bring balance during cycles of decline. In my time, science tried to reduce all human legacy to genetics, to blood as the archive of the physical. But the true archive of the soul is in the ethers, in the subtle records that envelop the human body and accompany it beyond death. Each of us possesses a unique vibratory field that contains the sum of all our existences, our spiritual loyalties, our falls, our silent conquests, and that invisible heritage guides the course of our deepest decisions. When a soul incarnates, it does so into a family that holds certain patterns, not only of character, but also of destiny. There lie the trials it has chosen to face, the mirrors it must measure, the knots it must untangle. Sometimes it is born as redeemer of its lineage, other times as the catalyst of conflicts dragged from remote times. In all cases, the blood acts as a contract, but the spiritual lineage defines the purpose of that contract. Not all visible lineages are real, nor are all true lineages visible. Some beings born in ordinary bodies are princes of the soul, and some born in palaces are slaves of their ignorance. Spiritual heritage is not transmitted by surname, but by the inner fire that cannot be feigned. The ancient Hebrews, who jealously guarded their patriarchal lines, also knew of the secret lineage of the Spirit. Therefore they distinguished between the carnal Israelite and the Israelite of the heart. St. Paul expressed this in his letters. Not the one who is outwardly Jewish is a Jew, but the one who is inwardly so. This distinction is vital to understanding that the true chosen people is not racial, but vibrational. Likewise, in the Hindu tradition, the original castes were not determined by birth, but by the quality of the soul. The Brahmin was not such by bloodline, but by purity of life, knowledge of the self, and selfless service. The degeneration of this wisdom into rigid systems of exclusion marks the fall of a civilization. Whenever spiritual heritage is forgotten in favor of outward appearance, the cycle closes and darkness enters. But true lineages, the invisible ones, remain like underground rivers that nourish oases in deserts. These lineages cross eras and cultures, leaving barely perceptible traces. They are the ones who awaken in every age when the world grows drowsy. They are the ones who bring the new seeds, even when all seems dry. The soul reading these lines and feeling an ancient call likely belongs to one of these lineages. It needs no proof or external confirmation. Its heritage lives in its inner fire. And if this is so, let it remember it is not here by chance or mere biological descent. It is here because its blood has been touched by the Spirit, and its heritage is the light it bears. Chapter 3. The soul is its descendants, karma, hidden genetics, and incarnation. Nothing in the universe happens by accident. Everything is governed by law, and where the profane eye sees chaos, the eye of the initiate contemplates the perfect interweaving of karma. The birth of a human being, the choice of their parents, the charity of their body, even the form of their blood, obey an invisible architecture whose cause resides deep within the soul and in the eternal records where their acts, thoughts, and silences are inscribed. Incarnation is a profoundly sacred act. It is not a fall but a choice. The soul, in its journey through the subtle planes, descends when the precise moment has arrived to continue its evolution, settle outstanding accounts, or assist in the elevation of a group or lineage. The body is not chosen arbitrarily, nor does one enter the family womb by mere biological instinct. What we call genetic inheritance is actually the visible reflection of a hidden genetics, a vibratory web that the soul recognizes as its own and irresistibly attracts it toward a womb, a mother, a bloodline. Before birth, the soul contemplates from higher planes the available possibilities for incarnation and chooses, within the limits allowed by its karma, that combination of physical, emotional, and spiritual factors which will best allow it to advance in its mission. Thus, the body received is both a consequence and a tool. Diseases, talents, temperaments, and family traits are inherited not by fatalism, but because they hide the keys necessary for the awakening of the soul. Modern science, upon discovering the genetic code, believed it had found the ultimate cause of the human form. but what it found was barely the shadow of an older script. Behind the physical DNA exists an etheric structure shaped by the soul's previous lives, its habits, desires, passions, virtue, or ignorance. This vibratory matrix is what determines the selection of sperm, ovum, environment, and the exact moment of birth. When theosophical schools speak of karma, they do not allude to punishment but to a law of balance. The soul is not thrown into a body by divine whim, but it itself, in the presence of its spiritual guides, traces the essential guidelines of its next life, knowing it must be born where its debts can be paid, its qualities enhanced, and its shadows illuminated. If a genetic disease appears on its path, it is not a blind tragedy but a carefully calculated opportunity to develop compassion, strength, or wisdom. Likewise, when a person is born with an extraordinarily gifted body, strong blood, a sensitive nervous system, and clear intelligence, this is not due to chance or solely parental heritage, but the result of many lives of discipline, purity, and commitment to the ideal. The nobility of the soul, sooner or later, impresses itself upon matter, but inheritance is not limited to the individual. Entire family lineages incarnate together, generation after generation, as karmic groups intertwine to resolve ancient patterns of love, hatred, power, betrayal, or service. These groups are visible not only in their names or genealogical trees, but in their shared destinies. Families marked by art, war, madness, spirituality, healing. Every surname, every coat of arms, every bloodline holds a hidden memory. And on an even deeper level, there exist spiritual lineages that transcend blood. They are groups of souls joined beyond visible genetics by a shared frequency of purpose. They recognize each other without words, find one another without searching. Sometimes they are born within the same biological lineage, other times as friends, lovers, disciples, adversaries. There is always a resonance that draws them together, for they share a common vibratory note engraved in their etheric fields. Incarnation, then, is a response. It is the echo of decisions made on other planes. The soul does not descend just because, but because it has heard a call. Sometimes that call comes from a family group that needs transformation. Other times from a nation, an ideal or a promise made to another soul before birth. Every authentic incarnation, that is, every incarnation conscious of its purpose, is an act of service. Now, if spiritual inheritance conditions incarnation, how does it relate to blood? The answer lies in internal alchemy. The blood flowing through our veins carries not only oxygen and nutrients, but also vibrations, memories, impulses, tendencies. Blood is the medium where the history of our ancestors is inscribed and the seal of our karmic lineage. But the soul, if awake, can transform that blood from within, purifying it, elevating it, turning it into a chalice where light can pour forth. This process is not symbolic but real. Great mystics, saints, and sages of all traditions have performed this alchemy. Through meditation, fasting, prayer, sacred work, pure thought, and devotion to the good, they raised the vibration of their blood, freeing it from inherited impurities and transforming it into a vehicle of light. In them hidden genetics became visible, their bodies healed with a touch, their voice transmitted peace, their mere presence elevated the soul of others. This is ultimately the hidden purpose of incarnation, to transform matter through the irradiation of spirit. We inherit bodies, yes, we inherit diseases and passions too, but not to surrender to them, rather to transmute them. Karma is not a chain, but a ladder, and the soul that knows its heritage can redeem it. Many fear blood for its density, its weight, its link to the animal, but initiates know that within blood also lies the fire of the spirit waiting to be released. The one who discovers this does not fear their lineage, their body, or their destiny. They understand that all was woven with precision for their ascent, and that every drop of their blood is a remembrance of their purpose in this world. Chapter 4, Blood and Consciousness, the blood ether and the centers of light. Deep within the human body, where matter merges with the divine breath, there exists a subtle field that science has yet to touch, but that ancient sages knew with certainty: the blood ether. This is not a visible or measurable substance by instruments, yet it is as real as the heat that precedes fire or the fragrance that anticipates the flower. The blood ether is the hidden vehicle of consciousness within the physical body. It is the bridge between the incarnated soul and its living temple. All blood is impregnated with prana, the vital solar principle. But beyond prana exists a finer vibration, an energy that responds directly to the thoughts, emotions, and aspirations of the human being. This energy forms a subtle field around the blood, a kind of internal aura perceived by clairvoyance as a flickering light surrounding the main arteries and the heart. This light is not static. Its coloration, intensity, and rhythm vary according to the individual state of consciousness. Blood, in its physical aspect, transports oxygen and nutrients. In its etheric aspect, it carries symbols, ideas, desires, and spiritual memory. Each drop of blood vibrates with a specific note, and these notes compose the inner song of the incarnated soul. Just as a detuned instrument produces dissonance, blood saturated with chaotic thoughts generates interference in the manifestation of spiritual will. The blood ether is, therefore, a faithful mirror of the being's internal state. The ancient Egyptians, in their highest mysteries, taught that the soul resides in the blood, not because it was literally imprisoned there, but because blood is its main channel of expression in the material world. The heart, the center of circulation, was considered the throne of the soul, and its beats were seen as responses of the soul to light or shadow. That is why Egyptian priests could diagnose a person's spiritual state simply by observing the rhythms of their pulse, the color of their skin, and the vibration of their breath. Within the human body are energy centers known by some schools as chakras, and by others as lotuses, seals, or wheels. These centers, located along the spine and in specific body regions, are vortices through which subtle energy flows. What is rarely said, and only taught to those who have purified their intention, is that blood is the current that connects these centers to each other, and the blood ether acts as a conductor between the chakras and the awakened consciousness. The heart center, for example, is directly related to the vibrational quality of the blood. When a person experiences pure love, compassion, or deep gratitude, the blood emits an etheric radiation of high frequency that strengthens the connection between soul and body. Conversely, when negative emotions are experienced, the subtle aspect of the blood becomes rarefied and its vibration lowers, hindering the flow between the centers of light. This is why spiritual practices must not focus only on the mental or emotional, but also on the purification and elevation of the blood itself. Fasting, meditation, devotional chanting, conscious breathing, and abstention from densifying substances. None of this is arbitrary asceticism, but bodily alchemy to refine the blood ether and allow consciousness to manifest without distortion. In the mystery schools of India, from which many of my teachings have been nourished, it was known that a true initiate must not only control their thoughts, but also their blood. For he who masters his blood masters impulse, and he who masters impulse masters his destiny. Blood responds to will like a river to its channel. Guided from within, it can become a torrent of light. Certain great spiritual healers in history did not heal through outward gestures, but by irradiation. The purity of their blood was so elevated, so pure, that their etheric field acted like a balm upon the subtle fields of those who approached them. It is no exaggeration to say that in those beings, blood had become a luminous substance, not by its red color, but by the vibration emanating from within. Even more, there is a mystery reserved about certain hidden centers not revealed to the world because of their transformative power. One of these is found within the blood itself, not in an organ or gland. It is a mobile, dispersed center without fixed form that activates only when the blood reaches a very high vibratory state. Then this subtle network begins to emit a golden light that crosses all centers and unifies the energy system into a single radiant field. This state, known in Hindu tradition as purified Kundalini and in Egypt as the opening of the fiery eye, is extremely rare and only appears in souls that have kept their entire life in service, voluntary sacrifice and renunciation of the lower self. What happens when this etheric field of the blood awakens? The soul begins to perceive the world not through the senses, but through the blood itself. The body becomes an oracle. The skin vibrates with subtle messages. Thoughts arise effortlessly, and the heart stops beating for itself and begins to beat for the entire world. This is the stage where the human ceases to be man and becomes a disciple of the will's channel. For they no longer live by impulses or desires, but by the closed pulse flowing through their illuminated blood. Thus, understanding the blood ether and its connection with the centers of light is to delve into the forgotten science of total awakening, a science that cannot be learned in books or laboratories, but in the living laboratory of the consecrated soul. And this knowledge, still kept in humanity's hidden archives, will be delivered again when the blood of the world has been redeemed from violence, selfishness, and ignorance, because only purified blood can contain the light without breaking. Chapter 5. Root Race and Cycles of Incarnation, the soul's journey through peoples. The human soul, in its long pilgrimage from the realms of light toward the density of matter, does not incarnate by chance nor evolve without purpose. Its descent and ascent are governed by cosmic laws as precise as the orbits of the stars, and one of the most sacred is the law of the root races. These races, known only to the custodians of ancient wisdom, must not be confused with today's ethnic groups, which are fragmented and degenerated reflections of much more archetypal primordial forms. The solar logos, in its constant emanation of life, projects evolutionary cycles that manifest on Earth through waves of humanity. Each of these waves constitutes a root race, a stage of collective consciousness that acts as a school, temple, and laboratory for the incarnated soul. In the secret archives of the Great White Brotherhood, the knowledge of these races is preserved, of which our current humanity is barely the fifth. Each root race has a particular spiritual purpose, a predominant soul quality, a dominant vibration in its blood, and a specific relationship with the elements of nature and planetary centers. As the soul incarnates in different root races and their sub-races, it acquires experiences that no individual could hold alone. Thus, the soul is neither white nor black, nor eastern nor western, but successively wears the garments of all peoples to understand, synthesize, and overcome the illusions of the dual world. The first root race, Hyperborean and ethereal, did not yet possess dense blood. They were luminous forms of almost invisible structure whose contact with matter was minimal. They fed on sunlight and breathed the pure prana of the ether. They knew nothing of conflict, desire, or ego. Their consciousness was an extension of planetary consciousness. In them, the soul manifested without filters, but their task was to prepare the energetic foundation for the future densification of the human being. The second race, also ethereal but closer to matter, was already male polar, dwelling in regions now submerged beneath ice and ocean. There began the first glimpse of individuality, and with it, the first movements of karma. Their blood, if it could be called that, was still condensed nebula, more vibration than substance. They were androgynous beings, not yet divided, whose consciousness operated from higher planes. The third race, the Lemurian, marked the true descent of the soul into matter. It was here that physical blood first appeared. The division of sexes, the emergence of physical organs, and with them the principle of biological inheritance occurred. Lemurian blood was dense, hot, charged with primary instincts and telluric energy. In this race arose the first passions, the first desires, and with them the need for internal laws. Humanity then began to experience duality in all its harshness. It was also in this race that the Lords of the Flame beings from Venus and higher planes, inoculated the mental principle into certain human groups, igniting in them the spark of self-awareness. The fourth root race, Atlantean, was the great civilization that today survives only in legends, symbols, and scattered fragments in the myths of all cultures. The Atlanteans developed powerful psychic and magical abilities, and their blood vibrated with an electromagnetic force not yet understood. This was blood of power, but also of danger. In its early stages, it was a vehicle of wisdom. In later stages, it degenerated through corruption, abuse of will, and forgetfulness of the soul. It was here that the first mystical castes were established, the first lineages of sacred blood, and also the first perversions of that knowledge. The fall of Atlantis was essentially the fall of closed blood in the hands of an unchecked collective ego. The fifth root race, Aryan, is current humanity. It was born in regions now desert, but once fertile and conducive to meditation. Its mission is to develop abstract thought, spiritual individuality, enlightened reason. Its blood is colder than Atlantean, more suited to mental synthesis, but also more exposed to emotional dryness and materialism. Here, the soul learns to consciously choose its destiny, to exercise its will, and to build bridges between science and spirit. The great challenge of this race is to reintegrate lost intuition without denying conquered reason. Within this fifth race are multiple sub-races, peoples and cultures that have flourished and fallen, each with its particular lesson. Greece brought the ideal of beauty and philosophical thought. Rome, the law; Egypt, death as transformation; India, union with the absolute. America, still in its youth, embodies synthesis, the mixing of bloods, the laboratory of future humanity. The sixth root race, yet to come, will emerge when the collective soul has learned to live not from the divisive mind, but from the sentient soul. It will be a luminous humanity, capable of telepathic communion, global service, vibratory fraternity. Its blood will be different, less dense, more radiant, capable of sustaining higher energies. In it, the body's centers of light will be awake from birth, but this will only happen if current humanity purifies its blood, its thought, and its purpose. There will be no leap without sacrifice, and beyond that, the seventh and final root race of this planetary cycle will be a solar humanity, where the soul incarnates not by karmic necessity, but by conscious love. There will be no more biological birth as we know it, but a direct manifestation of spirit in forms of light. Its blood will not be red, but white as luminous milk. It will be the blood of the fully manifested Logos. This journey of the soul through races and peoples is the path of redemption. Each people has its gift, its pain, its debt. No people is chosen by privilege, but by responsibility, and all will at some point incarnate in each to learn from within what is only judged from without. Reincarnation is not merely a repetition of lives, but a journey through the diversity of human experience. The soul incarnates in all colors, all languages, all classes, all bloods, because only thus can it remember it is more than all of these. Understanding root races is the antidote to all forms of racial pride. Knowing that we have been Lemurians, Atlanteans, Aryans, and will be part of future races frees us from the mirage of superiority. What matters is not the form we occupy today, but the consciousness we cultivate in it. And thus the soul continues its journey, crossing the citadels of time, weaving destinies among different peoples, bleeding in wars and singing in temples, until the whole world becomes its homeland and all races one planetary body. That is the end of the journey, not forced unity, but the conscious communion of redeemed diversity. Chapter 6. Atlanteans, Aryans, and the Seals of Ancestral Blood. Deep within the human soul, where words and memories of the present life cannot reach, indelible impressions persist, impressions that do not come from this existence, but from other ages of the world. They are marks etched not in flesh, but in the vibration of the blood. Etheric marks that reveal the spiritual origin of those who have passed through previous civilizations, forgotten races and lineages of power and wisdom, whose echoes still resonate in sensitive souls. These are the seals of ancestral blood. The visible history of man does not begin in Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the Beric temples. It begins much earlier, when humanity lived under different skies, on continents now sleeping beneath the ocean. The Atlantean and Aryan races represent two key stages in the evolution of human consciousness. Understanding them is to grasp the spiritual drama that still unfolds in the bodies and bloodlines of the present. The Atlanteans, heirs of the third root race and creators of the fourth, developed a powerful civilization, deeply magical, where blood became a symbol of power and lineage. Their knowledge of elemental forces was vast, and their use of etheric energy through the human body allowed them to build, move, and transform matter by the sheer force of will. But that power largely resided in the vibratory quality of their blood. Atlantean blood was saturated with astral energy, a mixture of overflowing emotion and incipient mental power. They were beings of intense emotions, strong passions, and emphatic will. Through specific rituals, they influenced their blood to activate hidden abilities, open energy centers, or enhance specific lineages. The castes of initiates guarded this secret and passed it down through family lines carefully selected for their vibrational purity. Marriage in the high circles of Atlantis was not a matter of desire, but of the energetic affinity of the blood. Yet, just as they cultivated power, the Atlanteans also fell into its selfish use. Blood was employed in dark practices, pacts with lower entities, genetic manipulation, and energetic slavery. Lineages dedicated to nefarious purposes developed, where controlling the blood meant controlling the soul. It was this corruption, more than any physical cataclysm, that caused Atlantis's final fall, the betrayal of the sacred blood. Not all Atlanteans vanished. Some migrated before the collapse, carrying with them fragments of their wisdom. These groups formed the nuclei of post-flood civilizations: Egyptians, Toltecs, Druids, ancient Chinese, and even certain Brahmanic castes. There in silence, the bearers of Atlantean blood preserved part of the original fire, now veiled by rituals, myths, and hidden genealogies. Thus the Aryan race was born, the fifth, which was meant to redeem the power corrupted by Atlantis. Unlike their predecessors, the Aryans were called to develop concrete mind, discernment, reason, language, and conscious individuality. Their blood consequently began to vibrate differently, less astral, more mental. It cooled slightly in its inner fire to give way to reflective clarity. The Aryan soul is more introspective, less impulsive, and more of a builder of abstract thought. However, the Aryans also inherited unresolved conflicts from the Atlanteans. Many souls who lived through Atlantis's collapse reincarnated in the early Aryan peoples to repair their karma. Some founded schools of wisdom, others revived old mistakes, and so the seals of ancestral blood continued to operate silently in new civilizations. What are these seals? They are etheric marks in the vibratory field of the blood that correspond to certain spiritual lineages. An individual who in past lives belonged to an Atlantean priestly lineage may be born today with an innate affinity for ritual, magic, and symbolism. Another who took part in warrior orders may have blood, whose vibration responds to conflict, strategy, and leadership. These impulses do not come from biological genetics, but from the vibrational inheritance impressed upon the ether of the blood at the moment of incarnation. Some carry seals of wisdom that make them sensitive to truths they never learned, languages they never studied, doctrines they never read. Others bear seals of darkness that drag them into ancient passions, vices that return with inexplicable force, karmic ties that defy logic. And there are those, rare but increasingly visible, who carry seals of redemption, souls who voluntarily incarnate in contaminated bloodlines to purify them from within, accepting the burden of entire lineages to transmute the past. The existence of these seals was known by the sages of Tibet, the guardians of the mysteries of Usis, the initiates of the Nile, and the true alchemists of Europe. They all knew that blood is a writing, and that under certain conditions it can be read, not with the eyes but with the soul. In certain advanced initiations, the disciple was exposed to an inner fire that awakened the dormant seals in their blood. By doing so, they remembered past lives, unfulfilled responsibilities, forgotten pacts. This experience was not merely mystical, it was biological, energetic, and transformative. Some could not bear it and fell ill or lost their reason. Only those who had purified their hearts were able to sustain the weight of ancestral memory. Today, many feel an ancient call in their veins, a fire they do not understand but that unsettles them. They are descendants of lost lineages, heirs to unfinished promises. Even without knowing it, their blood vibrates with the echoes of Atlantis, with the songs of the primordials, with the drums of Lemuria. And that call will not disappear until it is answered. It is not enough to remember. Redemption is necessary. Every human being carrying an ancestral seal has the opportunity to purify it, to turn it into a source of light. By raising their consciousness, their blood changes, and by changing their blood, they alter the vibration of the entire lineage. Thus, the soul's work is not only personal, but collective. One can only free many because blood, when consecrated to the spirit, remembers its stellar origin and sings again the forgotten hymn of the gods. Chapter 7. The Chosen People and the Archetype of Blood Sacrifice. Among all the symbols that have traversed the history of religions and peoples, none has been as persistent or as deeply esoteric as that of blood sacrifice. From primitive altars to the highest liturgies, blood has been offered, conserved, shed, and conserved again, as if hiding a secret humanity has yet to fully decipher. This secret does not reside in the biological, but in the archetypal. Blood as the mediator between fallen matter and the redeeming spirit. Throughout the ages, various cultures have embodied aspects of the cosmic drama, but there exists a human group that, by karmic disposition and spiritual choice, assumed a singular role in this closed theatre. The Hebrew people, misunderstood by many, exalted or vilified by others, but possessing a profound connection with the archetype of blood sacrifice. Inscribed within them was a spiritual function that was no privilege, but a burden, whose mystery still pulses within the folds of history. The ancient sages did not speak of race in modern terms. The word they used was people, meaning not only an ethnic group, but a collective embodiment of an archetypal idea. The Hebrew people, in their purest stage, were the vehicle of the principle of redemption through suffering, bearers of the devotional fire channeled toward a single God, and the visible manifestation of the hidden drama of the soul separating from its source and yearning to return. Beneath the literal narratives of the Old Testament lies an esoteric current revealing profound knowledge of the power of blood. The Passover lamb, the sprinkling of the altar, the meticulous rules of ritual purity and animal sacrifices are not mere religious archaisms, but echoes of very ancient practices designed to regulate the etheric circulation of blood in contexts of invocation and contact with higher planes. The priest, in officiating, did not manipulate flesh, but currents of vital force, and blood was the channel through which this force ascended toward the invisible. The concept of the chosen people, so misunderstood, did not imply biological or moral superiority, but a cosmic choice, to serve as a collective receptacle for the archetype of conscious sacrifice. Just as in the human body the heart assumes the task of receiving, purifying, and redistributing blood, the chosen people were called to represent this very role in history, to absorb collective karma, purify it through suffering, and return it to the world as transformed wisdom. This choice, however, was not without shadow. Every spiritual function carries the risk of distortion. Instead of understanding their role as service to humanity, certain castes and religious structures transformed the choice into separation and sacrifice into dogma. They forgot that the bloodshed was not an end in itself, but an image of inner surrender. Thus, the original energy began to distort, and the archetype of sacrifice degenerated into exclusivism, legalism, and fear. But what is true does not disappear. It transforms. And the archetype found a higher expression in the mystery of Golgotha, where symbol became flesh, and the blood of the supreme initiate Jesus, the solar Christ, was shed not to appease an external deity, but to imprint in the earth's etheric web an impulse of universal redemption. In that act, the culmination of centuries of esoteric preparation within the Hebrew people, the archetype was freed from its ancient form. Sacrifice ceased to be an external rite and became an inner alchemy. No longer was the blood of animals necessary, for the awakened soul could offer its will, ego, and ignorance to be consumed by the fire of spirit. Thus, the chosen people fulfilled their function, not in the literal power, but in the concealment of mystery. Their blood, marked by generations of ritual, pain, diaspora, and fidelity, became a collective mirror of the initiatory process of the human soul. And those who incarnate today in that lineage, conscious or not, carry in their blood the resonance of that archetypal function. But they are not alone. Other peoples in different eras have embodied other archetypes. The Egyptians, solar wisdom; the Indians, mystical union; the Greeks, the beauty of intellect; the Germans, cosmic will. All form part of the great planetary body, where each lineage fulfills a role, and all, in alternating cycles, bear the fire and weight of sacrifice, because the chosen people is not one but all at different moments in time. Today, humanity as a whole is called to be the new chosen people, not by blood, but by consciousness, not by genealogy, but by vibration. Sacrifice is no longer demanded on altars but in the heart, to sacrifice ego, hatred, separation, and allow blood transmuted by love and truth to become new wine, circulating light, a bridge to the divine. And those who understand this mystery will cease to ask who was chosen and begin to ask why they have been called to awaken. Chapter 8. Taboo and Alchemy, Mysteries of Menstruation and Semen. There are two substances in the human body whose potency is such that all ancient cultures surrounded them with symbols, rituals, and taboos: menstrual blood and seminal fluid. Both are direct vehicles of the creative principle, channels through which the soul descends into flesh, and the flesh can, if consecrated, become worthy of the spirit. Within these fluids lies the mystery of incarnation, the perpetuation of life, but also the possibility of inner transmutation. That is why they were veiled, and why the modern world, in its ignorance, has profaned them. The ancient sages were neither Puritans nor superstitious. They knew that wherever the greatest power resides, the greatest danger also lurks. Thus, they wrapped the mystery in veils, not to oppress, but to protect. They understood that both menstruation and semen contain such an intense etheric charge that they can open doors to invisible planes, alter the energetic field of the environment, and awaken dormant energies within the human body. Therefore, they were treated with reverence and respect, and were never trivialized or ignored. From an esoteric perspective, menstruation is not a biological residue, but a cyclical purge of etheric energies that have not been used for physical gestation. Each lunar cycle prepares the female body for an act of creation. When that act does not materialize, the body releases not only matter, but vibration. This discharge is not neutral. It contains the remnants of a frustrated creative impulse, and is thus emotionally charged. It is lunar fire without form. Women who have preserved a certain spiritual sensitivity know that during menstruation their intuition sharpens, their dreams intensify, and their energetic field becomes more permeable. This is not weakness. It is a moment of opening toward the invisible plane. For this reason, in many ancient cultures, menstruating women were withdrawn from daily work, not due to impurity, but because their field was exposed and needed protection. In certain temples, it was precisely in this state that women could prophesy, receive visions, or serve as oracles of the deities. Menstrual blood was collected, preserved, and buried, or even used in fertility or healing rituals. The patriarchal degeneration of menstrual symbolism transformed the sacred into taboo, the spiritual into impurity. The rejection of women's blood was, in reality, a rejection of female power as the bearer of life and as a channel of lunar mysteries. It is no coincidence that the modern system, based on control and cold logic, has stigmatized what it cannot dominate: cyclicity, intuition, the power of blood flowing without order or permission. Semen, for its part, is equally powerful. It is the most concentrated physical vehicle of the solar principle in the male body. Each ejaculation represents the discharge of a complete vital impulse, pranic energy destined in its natural function for the creation of life. But on the higher planes of spiritual alchemy, this fluid can be redirected, elevated, and transformed into ascending force, capable of awakening dormant energy centers and nourishing the body of light. Tantric yogis, monastic ascetics, Egyptian initiates, and certain European alchemists understood that the vital seed was not only for reproduction, but also for internal regeneration. When semen is not discharged carelessly but conserved and transmuted, it becomes internal nectar. Through specific disciplines, breath control, meditation, conscious chastity, the seminal fluid becomes an ascending current that nourishes the subtle nervous system, strengthens the aura, and activates higher intuition. Hence, many initiatic orders required chastity, not out of morality, but out of esoteric science. Because one who wastes their seed unconsciously weakens their etheric field, and one who conserves it with elevated intention magnetizes their blood, strengthens their will, and reinforces their connection with the higher soul. This is not repression, but transmutation. Now, when man and woman unite sexually from a higher plane, aware of the act as ritual, as a communion of solar and lunar forces, the exchange of fluids can become a form of living alchemy. Then, menstrual blood and semen do not mix merely for procreation, but create a vibratory field capable of opening portals, healing ancestral memories, and activating dormant seals in the blood. But for this to happen, body, mind, and soul must be aligned. In profane unions, where desire rules without light, fluids become channels for dense entities, karmic bindings, and the repetition of cycles without transcendence. In sacred unions, fluids are chalices from which the soul drinks the essence of creation itself. Both menstruation and semen can be used, depending on the state of consciousness, for healing or degeneration. They are threshold substances, doors that can open toward light or shadow. That is why they were surrounded by silence, taboo, and secrecy, because one who is not prepared to handle them with purity may be burned from within. Humanity today, in its eagerness to break taboos, has confused liberation with trivialization. It speaks openly of what it does not understand and exposes to ridicule what should be honored. True freedom does not consist in denying mystery, but in recovering its concealed meaning from an awakened consciousness. The body is a temple. Menstrual blood and semen are its internal offerings. When treated with reverence, they become paths to the invisible. When trivialized, they become waste, and the soul then withdraws, wounded by the profanation of the altar. Those who wish to awaken the secrets of blood must begin by reconciling with the most feared, the most repressed, the most forgotten, the creative energy in its purest and most human form. Only then can the blood sing again its original song, that of the incarnated spirit, not to degrade but to redeem matter. Chapter 9. Initiatic lineages: blood, solar blood, stellar blood. Not all blood is the same. Although on the surface all human beings share the same biochemical elements, on invisible planes, blood vibrates with specific qualities, inherited not only from physical lineage, but also from spiritual lineage. There are bloodlines marked by karmic pain, others bearing the imprint of ancient soul conquests, and a very few indeed, carry the seal of initiatic lineages. Bloods that have been tempered by the fire of consciousness, purified through multiple incarnations, and consecrated to serve a cause greater than the personal self. Throughout humanity's hidden history, some lineages have been chosen, or more precisely, have offered themselves, to act as channels of transmission between higher worlds and the dense plane. These lineages have not always held visible thrones nor been recognized by official history, but on subtle planes, their blood has vibrated differently, radiating a frequency capable of sustaining and channeling cosmic order influences. The first of these lineages is that of the royal blood. This should not be confused with monarchic houses as known by the profane world. The term royal means the ruler, the one who has the capacity to govern matter through spirit. Royal blood is not necessarily inherited genealogically, although at certain times it was protected through family lines conscious of their function. It is above all a vibrational frequency that allows the soul to directly receive the will of higher planes and manifest it as leadership, order, justice, and transcendent vision. Ancient priest kings like Melchizedek, Rama, or certain initiated pharaohs did not rule by hereditary right but by consecration. Their blood had been elevated in specific rituals, subjected to inner trials, and harmonized with planetary forces so they could act as living bridges between heaven and earth. When royal blood separated from the spirit that animated it, it degenerated into lineages of power without virtue, and its fall was inevitable. But the invisible lineage remained scattered among the righteous who today, without titles or crowns, still carry in their blood the flame of divine governance. The second lineage is that of solar blood, corresponding to those beings whose inner evolution has allowed them to absorb directly the fire of the solar logos and transmute it into vital energy of extremely high frequency. These individuals are not born with such blood, but forge it through inner disciplines, renunciations, conscious sacrifices, and communion with planes of light. Their blood transforms into a radiant vessel capable of sustaining solar light without being consumed by it. In the world's initiatic traditions, these beings were known as the children of the sun, the Akmaobis, the Magi kings, the children of the flame. In their blood, iron vibrated at a higher tone. Prana flowed unobstructed, and their energy centers remained open for long periods. Solar blood allowed them to act as healers, protectors, or guardians of hidden knowledge. Their mere presence harmonized spaces, their words held creative power, and their acts generated waves of spiritual resonance that outlasted their physical bodies. But even above that, in a rarer and quieter sphere exists stellar blood, that which does not originally belong to this planetary evolution. These are souls who have come from other solar systems, distant constellations, races not born of Earth but who out of love have descended into human clay to assist in its elevation. Their blood, though biologically human, contains frequencies that cannot be explained by common genetics. Within it vibrates a memory of starry abodes, temples of other worlds, pacts made before this humanity breathed for the first time. These stellar beings do not always recognize themselves. In fact, they often feel alien to the world, out of sync, as if their blood did not entirely belong to them. And it is true. Their blood is alone, a vehicle adapted to a higher purpose. But when they awaken, their mission becomes clear. They have not come to dominate, but to sow. They have not come to teach from superiority, but to remind humanity of its celestial origin. Some have been prophets, others artists, others silent monks who with their mere presence radiate peace or wisdom without words. Both royal blood, solar blood, and stellar blood are not privileges nor marks of external hierarchy. They are spiritual functions, incarnations of cosmic principles that have accepted to descend into density in order to elevate it. And although the world ignores them, persecutes them, or ridicules them, the invisible plane recognizes them. There their names are written, not in books, but in the luminous ether of living records. In certain secret traditions, even today, consecrated bloodlines are safeguarded, not to preserve them from mixing, but to protect a frequency that, if dispersed without guidance, can lose its efficacy. These orders seek no worldly power. They are silent, humble, sometimes hidden even from their own members. But when humanity approaches thresholds of deep crisis, these lineages activate, and their bearers, whether conscious of their heritage or not, begin to remember to be called, to fulfill missions once thought forgotten. The awakening of these lineages is not romantic, easy, nor free of pain. It involves renunciation, service, inner discipline, and above all, acceptance of the fire that dwells in their blood. Because that blood cannot be used for ego, ambition, or purposeless pleasure. If tried, it burns. If betrayed, it sicks. If consecrated, it becomes a channel of luminous power in service of the greater plan. And how to recognize if one belongs to one of these lineages? Not by genealogy, nor by color, nor by family history. It is recognized by the internal call that does not cease, by the natural attraction to the sacred, by the instinctive rejection of lies, by the feeling that one is here for more than survival, and above all by the constant presence of a force demanding transformation. Whoever carries this blood cannot sleep for long, because it itself cries out, burns, awakens, and when the soul answers, everything aligns for the fulfillment of destiny. Chapter 10. The Blood Oath, Pacts, Rites, and the Preservation of the Spirit. Deep within the memory of peoples before writing existed, the contract was blood. Where today signatures are stamped and papers sealed, once veins were opened. The oath was not a word cast to the wind, but a vital substance offered in action, for it was understood that blood is the very essence of being, and that by shedding it, even a single drop, the entire soul was implicated. Since the dawn of humanity, blood oaths have held a central place in sacred rites, alliances between tribes, hidden initiations, and even pacts between man and the invisible. This practice, now forgotten or degraded, was not superstition but living magic, the science of correspondences, the recognition of the power that flows when the soul consecrates its most intimate vessel, the blood itself. Blood was never spilled without purpose. Every drop shed in ritual sealed a profound agreement, not only between people, but between planes. Because when blood is offered in conscious and ritualized act, it becomes a vibratory bridge between the material world and the invisible spheres. A breach opens in the subtle membrane of the world, and the energies invoked, whether higher or lower, respond, drawn by the living sacrifice. This was known to the ancient peoples. In many archaic cultures, two individuals wishing to seal an alliance beyond time would cut their palms and join their blood. It was no theatrical gesture, but a mystical act. By mixing their blood, they fused not only their current destiny, but also their future karma. The ancients said, "He who joins his blood, joins his weapon." And if that union was betrayed, the consequences were profound because the spirit had been called as witness. This knowledge was preserved in even more refined form within mystery schools. There, the blood oath was not made with knives but with vibration. During certain initiatory ceremonies, the disciple consecrated their blood to the path, and through sealed words, ritual gestures, and energetic channeling, their blood was imbued with a new seal. From that moment on, the entire body vibrated differently, and the soul was linked to a spiritual current it could no longer abandon, without internal consequences. The initiatory oath was not an external obligation, but an internal consecration. The disciple offered their blood to the spirit, and with it their will, their time, their body, their karma. Not all were ready. Only those who had purified their intention, conquered their lower passions, and understood the magnitude of the commitment could seal their blood. For once the oath was made, life no longer belonged entirely to them. They had entered a pact of accelerated evolution where error is quickly paid for, but light multiplies. On the esoteric plane, this oath leaves a permanent vibratory mark. It is an etheric seal on the bloodstream, perceptible to certain initiates and subtle entities. The body becomes a consecrated temple, the blood a living contract, the soul a progressing offering. However, not all blood oaths have been pure. In some decadent civilizations, this knowledge was perverted. Blood was used to seal pacts with dark forces, to gain power, longevity, or favors in the lower astral plane. Human sacrifice rituals were practiced. Blood was drunk, believing it would grant the other's strength. The symbol was corrupted until it became an instrument of enslavement. These acts left deep wounds in humanity's energetic field, and their shadow still lingers in certain degraded occult practices. For this reason, the blood oath must be understood in its sacred origin, not as an act of violence but as a consecration, not as manipulation but as an act of voluntary surrender to the spirit. Today, although visible rituals have disappeared, blood remains a vehicle of promise. When a human being offers their life to a cause, when they give themselves out of love, when they sacrifice for something greater than themselves, their blood vibrates differently, and even if there is no external rite, the spiritual plane records it. Because the true blood oath needs no knife, it is made with pure intention and inner fire. The preservation of the spirit in the blood is therefore not a metaphor, but a real possibility. There are people whose blood has been tempered by lives of service, truth, and purity. In them, blood becomes a living reliquary of the spirit, and when they die, that vibration remains on the earth, leaving an invisible mark that inspires, protects, and awakens others. Thus, saints, sages, and martyrs of the light have been born. Their blood was not spilled in vain because in its shedding, physical or symbolic, they sealed a pact that still resonates in the world. And as long as there are men and women willing to consecrate their lives to the highest ideal, blood will remain the living contract between earth and heaven. Chapter 11. Racism as Heresy, the Deviation from the Sacred Mystery. There are deviations that are errors of judgment, others that stem from ignorance, but some, the most dangerous, are spiritual heresies, profound falsifications of closed truths, distortions born of pride that crystallize into structures capable of hardening the soul and darkening the conscience. Such is the case of racism. At its deepest root, racism is a profanation of the mystery of blood. It is the perversion of knowledge that was originally guarded. The recognition that human blood possesses diverse vibratory qualities linked to the citruses of the soul, to spiritual lineages, and to root races. This knowledge, kept by the sages of the ancient world, was veiled not out of fear, but out of respect, because they knew that if placed in impure hands, it would become a weapon. And that is precisely what happened. Racism arose when some, observing the external differences between peoples, skin color, language, features, customs, assumed those differences were signs of intrinsic superiority or inferiority. They ignored the law of karma, despised the wisdom of reincarnation, and forgot that the soul has no color, but does need many forms to complete itself. The blood of each people does have a unique vibration, that is true, but this difference does not establish hierarchies, only functions within the grand symphony of human evolution. Just as the body needs the heart, the liver, the lungs, and the skin, each racial confluence plays a necessary role within the planetary organism. There are no inferior organs. There is ignorance of their purpose. And when one part of the body believes itself superior to the others, disease appears. Racism is a disease of the soul. It is spiritual ego disguised as collective identity. It is the attempt to make transient racial form into absolute, forgetting that every race is born, flourishes, and dies as part of a greater cycle. It is therefore a rebellion against the law of impermanence, a denial of the essential unity of life. The sages of Atlantis, before its fall, already warned of this danger. They knew that when the knowledge of the vibratory lineages of blood was used to establish fixed castes, hereditary privileges, and disdain for what is different, the sacred power of blood would be corrupted. And so it was. Castes degenerated into systems of oppression, races into excuses for domination, difference into pretext for violence. In the current Aryan cycle, our present humanity, This distortion reached dramatic levels. Pseudoscientific theories were constructed to justify the supremacy of certain groups. Blood was shed in the name of a racial purity that did not exist. False symbols became emblems of hatred. And worst of all, the spiritual heritage of entire peoples was defiled, branded as inferior simply for having been born with a different vibration. This was not only a historical error, it was and remains a metaphysical heresy, because it denies the wisdom of the soul's evolution through forms. It denies that we have all been, in past lives, members of different races, castes, and cultures. It denies that the purpose of incarnation is precisely to pass through all of them so that the soul remains complete. An initiate does not ask about the color of the skin, but about the charity of the light in the eyes. They do not seek earthly genealogies, but vibrations of the heart, for they know that blood, when consecrated to the spirit, transcends all distinctions. The great avatars who have walked the earth did not choose to be born among the most powerful peoples. Krishna in a stable, Buddha in a noble yet humble lineage, Jesus among shepherds and artisans. Why? Because the enlightened soul is not limited by racial form but inhabits it as a vehicle, knowing that its true homeland is not the blood but the spirit that animates it. To combat racism is not only an ethical act but a spiritual demand. For as long as one part of humanity believes itself superior to another due to race, culture, or heritage, the heart of the world cannot beat in harmony. Human blood will continue to be shed in the name of illusions, and true spiritual lineages will continue to be ignored. But a time is coming, and it is already near, when humanity will begin to see with the eyes of the soul, a time when differences will be celebrated as expressions of the one and not as threats, when races will blend not in confusion but in harmony. Then the mystery of blood will finally be understood, not as cause for separation, but as evidence that the spirit, when manifested, sings with many voices. Those who still harbor hatred for another's blood have forgotten they were part of that blood in other lives, and those who despise a race despise a part of themselves. For we all come from the same source and return to the one. Blood distinguishes us on earth, but the soul unifies us in heaven, and only when this truth is lived will the wound of humanity begin to heal. Chapter 12. The Christ and the Blood, the transfusion of the Logos into humanity. In the hidden history of humanity, there are moments when the divine becomes flesh, and the eternal penetrates the veil of time to accomplish a work no human words can contain. One of those moments, perhaps the most sealed of all, was the incarnation of the Christ, not as a theological figure confined within dogmas, but as a living emanation of the solar Logos, incarnated through the Master Jesus to sow in the blood of the world a vibration that still resonates and continues transforming the very substance of humanity. This act was not merely a symbol, a limited event, or a corner of the ancient world. It was a spiritual transfusion. The blood of Jesus shed at Golgotha was not only a physical sacrifice, but a cosmic alchemy, for it did not flow with only human blood. It carried the fire of the Christ, the radiation of the Word who, in the beginning, was with God and was God. That blood, charged with the fullness of the Logos, was poured onto the earth not to appease an angry deity as ancient creeds taught, but to inject into the etheric fabric of humanity a new evolutionary frequency. Understanding this requires abandoning theological molds and entering the greater mysteries. There, the Christ is not an individual but a solar consciousness, a cosmic intelligence whose function is to mediate between the Absolute Spirit and the worlds of form. Since before the earth existed, the Christ has been the heart of the Logos, the vibrant pulse animating evolution, the redeeming principle guiding matter back to the light. But when that Christ fully descended into human incarnation, something unprecedented occurred. The frequency of the Logos entered the blood. In the body of the Master Jesus, that blood was unlike any other. It was transubstantiated, elevated matter, contained in a body prepared through many lives and centuries. His physical lineage, descendant of Essene and Levitical lines, had been carefully chosen to sustain that vibration. His spiritual lineage, even older, came from stellar lineages. Thus, when the consciousness of the Christ descended upon him, so say the esotericists, at the baptism in the Jordan, Jesus' blood became a direct vessel of the solar logos. And that blood, when shed at Calvary, was not lost. It penetrated the earth, joined the planetary etheric field, and was imprinted on the vibratory memory of humanity. Since then, every human being who raises their consciousness can, if prepared, connect with that frequency. Because that blood did not disappear, it lives in the subtle field of the planet as a redeeming current, as a living code, as both symbol and reality. The ancient Rosicrucians knew this. They taught that the true grail was not a physical cup, but the etheric aura that captured the last drops of that consecrated blood, and that since then this invisible cup floats in the subtle planes, waiting to be touched by those whose souls have been purified by love and conscious sacrifice. Whoever touches it, not with hands but with inner purity, receives the mystical transfusion, the activation of Christ consciousness in their own blood. Because it is not merely about believing in Christ, but about Christifying one's own substance, that is, allowing the higher consciousness of unconditional love, divine will, and silent wisdom to penetrate our own blood. This is the true communion, beyond external rites, that our blood, once driven by passions, dark inheritances, and repetitive patterns, has been transfigured by the light that descended more than 2 millennia ago and still pulses in the spiritual heart of humanity. This transformation is neither immediate nor forced. It is an inner work. The blood in each of us holds memories of ego, lineage, and past. But when open to the vibration of the Christ, it gradually begins to change. It becomes more sensitive to the sacred, more resistant to corruption, more capable of sustaining the light. It is magnetized by the force of the soul. It begins to remember its divine origin. There are those who already live this, even if they cannot put it into words. Their blood has been touched by the Christ vibration. They are those who radiate compassion effortlessly, who forgive beyond logic, who serve without expecting reward. Their blood is different, not genetically, but because it has been impregnated by the very impulse that descended at Golgotha. Christ did not come to found a religion. He came to perform a universal spiritual transfusion. His blood was seed, and every soul is soil. Some have received it, others still reject it. But the seed is alive, active, waiting for the moment to sprout. Thus, Christ and blood are united by a mystery that transcends time, and whoever wishes to follow his steps does not need to shed their blood physically, but to consecrate it inwardly, offering it in every act, every thought, every renunciation of ego, as a living chalice where the Logos can continue to manifest. Because Golgotha was not an end. It was the beginning of a new evolution woven not in books, but in the blood of all who have decided to carry Christ in their pulse, in their breath, and in the silent fire burning deep within their hearts. Chapter 13. The future of the human lineage, mestizaje, synthesis, and the race of the soul. Every form that fragments seeks to reunify, every principle that disperses yearns for synthesis. In the long history of humanity, races, cultures, and lineages have been necessary manifestations of divine diversity, tools for learning and channels through which the soul gains experience in countless tones and nuances. But the time has come, and the greater mysteries have been announced, in which the process of differentiation must give way to a higher one, that of synthesis. Humanity is moving toward a new evolutionary phase that can no longer be sustained by separation, by racial purity understood as a supreme value, nor by pride in particular lineages. What is called to be born is not another race among others, but a race of the soul, a new type of human being who, though embodied in diverse bodies, will carry a blood transfigured by unified consciousness. This is neither a romantic ideal nor a political utopia. It is a prophetic reality inscribed in the cycles of spiritual evolution. Just as previous root races have arisen one after another as stages of development for the collective soul, so too will future humanity be an emanation of a higher principle, the deep understanding that the spirit is one and that all forms are temporary expressions of that eternal unity. Mestizaje, so often rejected, will be one of the privileged vehicles of this transformation, not as chaotic mixing, but as a harmonious fusion of vibrations. When two distinct lineages consciously intertwine, it is not only genes that cross, but memories merge, karmas reconcile, and paths open that were once blocked. In this fusion, the blood becomes more plastic, more apt to sustain impulses of the higher soul, freer from ancestral bonds. This mestizaje will not only be biological but spiritual, cultural, and vibrational. The human soul is learning to recognize itself in the other, to resonate with different languages, to understand foreign symbols without losing its own root. Invisible walls between religions, philosophies, and traditions are dissolving. What emerges from this interweaving is not confusion, but synthesis, a broader wisdom, less dogmatic, more intuitive. The souls being born at this time into mestizo skin, into multi-child families, in contexts where no single tradition dominates, are not accidents of chance. They are heralds of the new lineage, links between worlds. If in their childhood they suffer disorientation or uprooting, it is because they are being freed from all blind loyalty to the old to become alchemists of the future. This race of the soul will need no blue blood, no illustrious surnames, no belonging to any visible elite. Its lineage will be internal. They will recognize each other by vibration, by the clarity in their gaze, by the compassion that inhabits them, by the intelligence that does not separate but unites. They will not be concentrated in a single geographic place but will spread across the earth as points of light, weaving an invisible web of consciousness. There will be signs in their bodies, not physical but subtle, a blood that responds more swiftly to the soul's impulse, a more sensitive nervous system, capable of perceiving non-ordinary dimensions, a natural tendency to reject conflict, domination, and violence, a deep nostalgia for a world that does not yet exist, but that they already carry within as memory. These beings will be the builders of the sixth root race, the one they will begin to form when current humanity purifies its collective karma and has learned the great lessons of ego, power, and identity. They will not be perfect, but they will be closer to Christ consciousness. They will need no temples to pray because their temple will be the heart. They will need no external hierarchies because their day will be the inner light. And yet, they will not be alone. For all the ancient lineages that have preserved the flame of the spirit will be called to integrate into this new collective body. The Egyptian knowledge, the Druid silence, the indigenous vision, the Eastern mysticism, the Western science of the soul, all will converge in a new alchemy, not as a superficial mixture, but as a conscious symphony. The blood of this future humanity will not be pure in racial terms. It will be blood unified in vibration, composed of redeemed fragments from all peoples. And it will be in this blood, not in any particular group, that the Logos will be able to descend again with all its power, because only a planetary body unified in soul can receive the coming light without breaking. Signs of this birth are already perceived. Borders become porous, languages blend, religions intersect, children of opposing cultures love one another, old enemies become allies. And although resistance from the old world is intense, the collective soul's impulse has already decided to move forward. The race of the soul will not be proclaimed by decree. It will be born in silence, like a tender shoot in the crack of a stone. And when the time comes, its blood will speak. Not with violence, not with cries, but with a vibration so pure it will touch the highest fibers of the human soul. Then the mystery of blood, so misunderstood, so distorted, so hidden, will finally shine in its essential truth, that blood was always the channel of the spirit, and only by returning to it consciously Can humanity be reborn? Chapter 14. Blood as Oracle, the psychic reading of the inner lineage. In the ancient sanctuaries of mysteries, hidden in caves and protected in deserts, guarded behind symbols incomprehensible to the uninitiated, there existed a science, not written, but transmitted from mouth to ear, from soul to soul. A living science, dangerous in the hands of the ego, yet sealed in the hands of the initiate. I refer to the vibratory reading of blood, also known as the art of deciphering the inner lineage through the blood aura. Blood on higher planes is not simply a red fluid. It is an etheric river that carries not only nutrients and oxygen, but also soul impulses, fragments of memory, karmic pacts, and seals invisible to the physical eye. When the soul descends into the body, the first thing it magnetizes is the blood. From its formation in the mother's womb, that blood begins to precisely record the codes of light and shadow that the soul brings from other lives. Thus, blood becomes a living oracle, a pulsating script that reveals who one truly is beyond appearances. Not all souls know how to read this oracle. To do so, one must have silenced the ego's interference, transcended judgment, and sharpened the inner senses that allow perception of the subtle without being deceived by illusion. At the highest levels of clairvoyant vision, the blood's aura can be seen as a waving field of color, rhythm, and geometry, whose language is universal, yet unique to each being. In some cases, this field shows dark tones, fractures, lines of vibratory arrest. These are signs of unresolved traumas, broken pacts, dense memories yet to be transmuted. In others, golden spirals, pulsating lights, ascending vibrations appear. These indicate service in other lives, inner achievements that have left their mark. In every case, the blood speaks, and it speaks with the voice of the incarnated soul. The great healers of the past, in Egypt, India, and hidden Tibet, did not diagnose through the body, but through the etheric blood. They knew physical illness was only the final manifestation of a much older imbalance. By contemplating the blood field, they knew whether the wound had come to purify, redeem, close cycles, or open new paths. It was not judgment, it was reading. Not condemnation, but recognition. Today, although the modern world has closed its eyes to the invisible, the vibratory field of the blood remains legible to those who have opened their spiritual hearts. Even in everyday life, some perceive, though unknowingly, glimpses of this reading. They feel attracted or repelled by others for no logical reason. They say, "There is something about their presence that unsettles me when I'm near them. I feel peace." This is not vague intuition. It is unconscious reading of the blood field, the inner lineage vibrating beyond words. Because every soul carries a lineage, I do not mean the biological lineage, which is merely the chosen stage. I mean the vibratory lineage of the spirit, that chain of experiences, challenges, promises, and gifts that form the deep map of the self. In the blood, this lineage manifests as an invisible footprint, the code of fire, as the esoteric teachings called it, or the seal of the journey, as named in other traditions. Those who learn to read this code need not ask about the history. They see it, feel it, perceive whether the soul is fulfilling its design, has forgotten its purpose, is repeating what was already overcome, or stands at the threshold of a new awakening. There are rare but intense moments when the blood speaks without the need for vision. It speaks through dreams, through sudden illnesses that bring messages, through chance encounters that reactivate memories, through physical sensations upon stepping in certain places or hearing certain names. In those moments, the inner oracle opens, and the blood remembers. The true art consists in listening without fear, because when the blood remembers, the soul does as well, and often that remembrance can be painful. It will reveal past betrayals, unrealized potentials, paths abandoned out of fear, but it can also reveal dormant gifts, closed bonds, forgotten missions ready to be reactivated. When blood becomes oracle, it ceases to be the slave of the body and becomes an instrument of the higher soul. Then the human being stops living unconsciously and begins to walk as an initiate, as a reader of oneself, as a priest of one's own inner temple. The initiates of the future will not wear robes nor need titles. They will be ordinary men and women, but with awakened blood. They will be able to recognize each other not by face but by vibration. And when two of them meet, they will not need many words because the blood will have already spoken. Chapter 15. The Inner Grail, Redemption, Purity, and the Fire of the Blood. There is a symbol that has crossed centuries, ignited legends, inspired impossible quests, and nourished the deepest longings of the human soul. A symbol wrapped in mystery, pursued by kings, hidden by initiates, misunderstood by theologians, and yet always present in the dreams of those who sense that life is much more than being born, suffering, and dying. That symbol is the Holy Grail, and it is not an object, but a state of being. It is the inner vessel where blood becomes light, where flesh becomes temple, where the incarnated soul finally consciously unites with the fire of the Spirit. In the great mysteries, the Grail was not a material cup. It was a vibratory state attained by those who, after long purifications and internal trials, had succeeded in redeeming their blood, cleansing it of the shadows of ego, the dense memories of lineage, the residues of desire and fear. Only then could the blood, no longer a slave to instinct, become a vehicle of the divine fire, and the entire body would transform into a living chalice, an inner grail containing the essence of the Logos. But what is this redemption of the blood? It is not to deny or punish it, as some mistaken doctrines have done. It is to transfigure it. It is to allow the pulse of the flesh to synchronize with the pulse of the spirit. It is to liberate the blood from its servitude, to karmic repetition, blind impulses, and inherited chains, and to raise it until it can hold the Christic flame without being consumed. Many believe the Grail was lost, but in truth, it has never been outside. What was lost is the knowledge of how to find it within. Because the Grail lives in the etheric heart of the human being. In that hidden point where blood and soul meet in silence, it is not visible to the outer eye. Only the purified soul can find it. And when it does, everything in its life changes. It no longer lives for itself. It becomes a servant of the plan, a bearer of light, a silent radiance of the fire. The Inner Grail demands purity, but not as external morality imposed by fear. It is purity as vibratory transparency, as coherence between what is thought, felt, and lived. It is the purity of a heart that has crossed darkness without closing itself. It is the blood that has known shadow, but has not allowed itself to be possessed by it. That purity is not weakness. It is refined strength, humility that has conquered pride, a will that surrenders to the highest without losing its power. In inner alchemy, that purity allows the blood to become the bearer of sacred fire, not a fire that burns, but one that illuminates, a fire that transmutes, the same fire that descended on the prophets, that burned in the bodies of saints without consuming them, that made the true sages vibrate with a light not of this world. That fire can only be contained by blood that has been consecrated from within, and that consecration is the mystery of the Grail. The great initiates of all eras, though they spoke different languages, all pointed to the same truth. Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, Christ. They spoke in different symbols but indicated the same truth, that the human body can be transformed into a sacred vessel, and that blood, far from being an obstacle, is the living bridge between matter and spirit. Therefore, the seeker's work is not to flee the body, but to redeem it from within, not to deny the blood, but to awaken it, not to destroy the past, but to transmute it until its vibration becomes music. The true seeker of the Grail does not go after castles, ancient codices, or relics. They go deep within themselves to the place where the soul can say, "Here is my blood, Lord. Let it be fire, let it be light, let it be yours." The Grail is where love is stronger than fear, where surrender is greater than ambition, where the soul sings even though the flesh trembles. And when that inner cup fills, not with wine but with the vibration of divine presence, then the world is no longer the same. Because a single human being who has awakened the grail within lights the paths of many who still do not remember who they are. This is the promise of the mystery of the blood, that at the end of all lineages, all races, all trials, the soul will find the fire, and the blood purified by service and love will become a light that never fades. And then the grail will cease to be a legend. It will be a presence, a living presence, breathing within you. Epilogue. When the blood sings, humanity as a body of light will arrive one day, and that day is not so far off, when the blood of the world awakens. It will not be by decree, nor by science, nor by dogma. It will be because in incarnated hearts begins to vibrate a remembrance that once the flesh was sacred, that the blood was song, that the human body was not a prison, but an instrument of the spirit. That day, races will no longer be borders but shades. Cultures will no longer clash, but will see each other as mirrors. Lineages will no longer cause pride or shame, but will be rivers flowing toward the same ocean, because humanity will understand it has always been one body, scattered through history, but united by the soul. And that body, humanity itself, will become a body of light, not as fantasy, but as a real vibratory state. Cells will be people, blood will be peoples, the nervous system will be networks of consciousness connecting sages, artists, those who love silently. And the heart will be the Christic presence at the center of that body, beating to the rhythm of the Logos, calling, infusing fire. When that body awakens, the blood of the world will sing. Yes, it will sing, because every vital current in each being will emit a unique note, and all together will form the symphony of the redeemed earth. There will be no dissonance because every vibration will find its place. Hatred will not take root because the blood will not allow it. Wars will cease because the inner fire will be stronger than any destructive impulse. The ancient sages knew this time would come. They wrote it in temples, sealed it in sacred geometries, whispered it in secret rituals, because they knew that all that is born of the blood can be transfigured by the soul. And when the blood becomes translucent to the spirit, the earth will again be worthy of its cosmic purpose. That song will not be of human voices, but of etheric vibrations. Initiates will hear it first. It will be like a murmur in the pulse, a note suspended in the air, a feeling of peace invading the body without apparent cause. It will be the hymn of awakened blood, the announcement that the cycle of separation has ended and humanity has finally remembered. Remembered what? That blood was always a bridge, not a border, that the highest lineage is that of service, that true purity is born from the inner fire, that the grail lives in every sincere heart, that Christ will not come from outside because he already dwells in the blood of those who love without measure. And when that day comes, the day the blood sings, everything that has been divided will reconcile. Heaven and earth will look upon each other without distance. Body and soul will walk as one, and humanity from its transfigured core will rise as what it was always meant to be, a living temple of light. Amen.